Hello listeners and welcome to the next exciting episode of the eGPlearning Podblast. I'm Andy.
And I'm Gandhi.
And we're here today for your next instalment of what's happening in the world of general practice and technology. So Gandhi, have you got any news for us to kick off with?
Well, to update our listeners, we've now actually got a sponsor. We'd like to give a shout out to the Health Tech Network. They're an online magazine nicknamed HTN. And HTN is an innovative daily news and opinion website for the health tech community. And they've been really supportive of our work. You know, we've been speaking with them for a while now in terms of a lot of the stuff we've been doing. I really would recommend that our listeners do actually have a look at their website. For those of you that are part of the eGPlearning group, you'll know that I share a lot of their news articles and stuff on that group because they are pretty much up to date in terms of what's going on in health tech, both in terms of primary and secondary care. So I really would recommend you guys have a little look at them, and thanks for them for supporting us.
And they've got a great Twitter feed, and there's an option on their website to sign up and subscribe to their newsletter. So I encourage you all to go out there and follow them and subscribe to the newsletter. Mm-hmm. So also another special mention out there to Blue microphones, and also perhaps Amazon Prime Day.
Definitely.
Gandhi and I both bought Blue Ice microphones, so hopefully you'll notice the improved audio quality.
Yeah, sorry, it's the Blue Yeti microphones.
Oh gosh, the Blue Ice is the cheaper one.
Yeah, and if you guys will remember, actually on our site, me and Andy had a little bit of a social media little thing there. Andy got a lovely red one, and I went and got the proper blue one. So yeah, have a look at it on our posts and stuff. But these mics are pretty awesome, we have to admit.
Excellent. So we're here today, and this is an interview episode. But there's both of us here. Normally it's just one of us.
Yeah, first time this has happened, isn't it?
It is.
No. First one was with you.
I was. So two of us were here once when Gandhi interviewed me. So we're both here today, and that's because I've got the honour of conducting perhaps a longer-awaited interview with Gandhi, someone who's fascinated me for years. So it's really interesting to be able to interview you, Gandhi. We speak often as colleagues and as friends, but interviewing someone's quite different because you get the opportunity to ask interesting, slightly more probing questions, things that you don't normally ask in day-to-day conversation. So I'm looking forward to that today.
Cool. Well, hopefully this will go well. I am an open book, as I always try to be. So yeah, let's see where we go.
Cool. So let's kick off. Just going to jump straight in there, Gandhi, and just ask, what's your favourite medical app and what's your favourite non-medical app?
Okay. As some of you probably know, I'm a little bit flighty when it comes to these kind of things. I'm always one of those people that likes things at the moment. In terms of my favourite medical app right now, I'll be honest, it's the MedCalc app. It's one that I find really helpful and useful in terms of figuring out different calculators to help in my clinical work and stuff. It used to be the BNF one, and it probably still is one of my all-time favourites. But right now, the one I'm using the most is definitely the MedCalc, and that's partly because I just find it so easy to get a hold of, really. In terms of non-medical, well, if you asked me the app I use the most, that's easily going to be Facebook. I'm just literally live on there. However, my favourite, I'll be honest, is a board gaming app that I use. So it's a board game called Star Realms. They've got their own little app, and pretty much every spare minute I've got where I've got some downtime, I'll spend on there having a good game and stuff. So if you guys haven't tried it, it's a really good and simple game to pick up, and I would recommend having a go. So
is that an app version of the board game?
Yeah, it's an app version of the board game itself. Average game takes me about 5 minutes or so. So nice little filler if I'm waiting, for example, in a queue for food or something like that. And yeah, very varied and stuff. A little bit of cost because you have to pay for the extra stuff if you want some variety and things. But you know what? I'm happy to pay for it and really enjoying it right now.
Oh, good tip. Excellent. So Gandhi, just delving a little bit back into the past and charting out your journey through tech. When did you first realise that you were interested in technology?
I think I've always have been. A lot of people probably recognise that I'm a little bit geeky. I've always been one of these, people that loves interesting sci-fi kind of stuff and things. So, I pretty much live on sci-fi and that kind of things. I'm a Trekkie, I love Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, all that kind of stuff. It's just in me.
Gandhi, I have to ask. So, favourite Star Trek captain or the best?
Oh, it's got to be Picard. Easily for me, and the fact that he might be coming back, he is coming back. That is just that gave me a little bit of a flutter.
That's true. I saw that at the Comic Con announcement.
Definitely. So the fact that he's coming back is just it's just news that lifts my soul. But yeah, so I've always had an interest in science, in tech and that kind of stuff. I guess if we're talking more about health tech, well, I always kind of wanted to be a GP. I knew from early doors that medicine was always my passion, and general practice was a great combination of both science, of talking to people, abilities to do different things and stuff. So general practice was pretty much always on the horizon for me. But it wasn't until I actually got started on my VTS. So I got interested in health tech purely and simply because I was trying to solve a problem. And that problem was, way back then, we had Internet Explorer 6.
Oh, right. I think we've got 8 now, I think.
It's now technically Edge. They've rebranded it and stuff.
The world turns.
But in terms of the NHS, we're still stuck with Internet Explorer 8. And my problem back then was that I loved to use all these various resources that we had available, things like GP Notebook, Patient Online, that kind of stuff. But loading up the web pages when I started my clinic used to take ages, and I hated it. And I'd have to type it in. And this was before the days that Google was, everywhere. So I created a website that basically had all these on a dashboard that you click and it takes you straight to them. And I kind of learned how to do it. A very simple, what you see, what you get kind of method. And I gave it to the VTS and said, here you go. And they kind of said, well, we don't want it because we want to make our own. I'm like, fine, okay, I'm going to keep it then. From then I just gradually started building up my knowledge of how tech works, how the internet works, and all the various things. And from that came social media. From that came more diverse health tech, so the peripherals, all the kit that we now use and how that works. And
Gandhi, what was that website called?
So that is my website. It's now called the eGPlearning.co.uk website. If you guys want to have a look, feel free. It's been running for about 13 odd years now.
Wow, there's the inception story, and I never heard that. I didn't know that was the background of eGPlearning and the eGPlearning Podblast, I guess.
Yeah. And from there, and the other part of it was always about this need and this want to help my peers. And many of you that know me will know that it's one of my passions is making sure that I can help and support my peers and learn from them by doing so. So I've been a big advocate of how GPs work in general practice. A lot of the roles that I've had have focused in terms of support for other people. And at the heart of it, my website was always about helping my colleagues, helping them to work smarter, helping them to work faster, and trying to improve their quality of life and our patients, obviously, in terms of doing so.
And I guess so. It's been around for over a decade, which just surprised me actually. So how did you keep momentum with that? Because some people start one thing and they stop.
It faded and flew at times. There's definitely some times where I'd spend days on end, working out some of the coding or working out how to figure out, to make this part better. And there were definitely some times where it crashed and burned. So I remember there was one point where I was at one of the RCGP annual conferences and I found out that my website had been pulled by my host because I never got the update that I had to pay for the domain backing, and I was terrified that I'd lost everything. I was scared. This was something I'd been working on for about 3 years at that point, and it was just gone. And having to track that all back and stuff. Also went through a really nasty period where it got hacked and I lost everything and had to build it back from scratch. Thankfully, with a little bit of help from some people in India, the power of the internet as always, I managed to get some of it back, and it is what it is now, and I maintain it. It's a hobby as well as a passion as well as a calling.
Oh, fantastic. Right, so Gandhi, you started to talk about some of the things that you're involved in, and I'm always really, really in awe of how many things you seem to do at once. But just for those people who don't know, so much about you out there, what are you currently up to? In your scope of work?
So people often hear me use the analogy I carry a lot of hats, and I think that's definitely true. So I think I counted this once, and I got up to 19 at one point, was my worst.
Okay.
I don't think I'm quite there now. I'm a GP, I'm a GP partner, I'm a GP trainer. I also obviously run and own the eGPlearning website and co-host this amazing podcast with you, Andy. And as well as that, I do a lot of stuff on social media. So I'm currently the treasurer for a group called GP Survival that was born out of social media and aims to support my peers in terms of a lot of the challenges that we now face. I also run about 4 other Facebook groups, including the System 1 Facebook group. Again, born out of my need for change. You're going to pick up this theme. I like to try and improve things, and that's inevitably where all my extra stuff comes from. I've done quite a few things with the Royal College. I've been a big advocate of the college itself from my first days when I was a trainee. The college kind of welcomed me with open arms. And as a result of that, I did a lot of things for them. So I've been an AIT rep, I've been a First 5 rep, I've been a treasurer for a faculty, and I've also been a chair of our local faculty as well. And currently, I'm an elect for the National Council as a representative, and I hope to continue to serve my peers and stuff and trying to help the college. I've never been afraid to criticise the college because I think actually, the college is as strong as its members, and if its members don't say anything, then it will not be where we want it to be. So I have no problem, commenting on how things may need to change and stuff.
Yeah. Do you see your roles in GP survival and with the college at odds with one another? It's sometimes felt that way in the past in terms of the two organisations.
Yeah, I mean, the organisations, I think, aim to try and work with each other, but definitely they have different viewpoints on particular things. And yeah, it's been challenging at times, and particularly in terms of the leads. I'm one of the only committee leads I'm the only committee lead that actually sits on the RCGP faculty, or in that more involved way. I think I'm the only member as well, actually, on the lead. But you know what? I think I can justify both roles. I think I've never hidden my views or my motives on how things need to be, and actually my aim is to try and make sure things work, and I think they can work together. I think at times both need to work closer together to have a better impact, and we will see where the future goes.
Yeah, I think it's important that GP survival voices are heard within the college. So I think you're doing a good job in doing that. I was also thinking, I think we met sort of through the college as well.
We did, in fact. So my first time I met you was at one of the new GP groups that was funded by the RCGP faculty, where you were actually leading it at the time.
Yeah, that was back in 2010 or something.
Something like that,
I think people were just beginning to think of the concept of First 5 then. It wasn't called a First 5 group, it was new GP groups. Interesting. So again, anything else you're currently up to? You can kind of, because there's a few things which you haven't mentioned around LMC.
Yeah, so I've also become an LMC rep recently. My local LMC was always something I kind of wasn't sure about whether it was a step I wanted to take. I think partly because I liked actually being slightly on the outside, calling my viewpoint and stuff. But I think one of the things that's always defined my career, I've always said that if you want to change something, you either be prepared to stand up and say something about it, or you shut up. Because with all due respect, if you're not going to say something or try and change something, then what's the point? And I know some people won't agree with that. They'll say that I can't do that. Fair enough. But if you don't commit, if you don't, contribute, then nothing will change. So recently, I spoke with a couple of my colleagues and felt that the LMC was actually an organisation I wanted to now be part of, and I'm enjoying it. Actually, it's only been a few months, and I've not really had the chance to get my teeth into anything significantly. Although, having said that, been to a couple of meetings with our local providers and seen how they work, and I'm interested to see how things develop. It's a challenging time for our profession, but definitely something I'm interested to see how that goes further.
Yeah, it seems like representation of the profession is important to you. Just reflecting on some of those roles that you've had. Is that something you feel is important to you, or that you're good at? How have you ended up with so many representative hats?
I think it's born out of this view that I always like to change things, if I'm being honest. I have this, like I said, I've got this mindset. If something's not right, you either speak up about it or you say nothing. And the problem is I like to change things for the better. I think that's always one of my viewpoints. I like looking at things. How can this work more effectively? How can this work more sensibly? And definitely for my peers, how can their working day be simpler? How can we improve patient care in terms of making it more streamlined or more, ideal? And that's where a lot of these representative roles come from, because I think, I've always got something that can be said about these kind of things, and I'm not afraid to say them. I think that's the other thing. I've never really hidden from saying controversial or different kind of viewpoints or sharing them.
No, that's certainly true. I always respect you for your challenge. In meetings, you'll often ask the challenging questions, and I think it's really important that people do that. Right, I'm going to ask you some questions about health tech.
Okay.
Now. And I'm really interested in kind of what you feel rather than what we think is reflected in the industry or the media and things like that. So what are you personally most excited about in health tech at the moment?
I think health tech brings opportunity. Health tech is obviously using technology to improve or change the way that we deliver a health system, and it is huge, and it's a growing field, and logarithmically even. There's lots of talk of the big tech companies coming into health and that kind of stuff, and how that may change the way that health care is delivered, how it's structured, sharing of data. And these are things we've covered in our previous podcasts. AI was our last episode that we talked about, and for me that was an awesome episode. Hopefully our listeners enjoyed listening to it. I know for a fact I loved creating that episode.
It was very fun to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm quite excited about AI. Is there any particular technologies or effects or anything in particular that's exciting you, or companies, or
So I think telemedicine as a whole is exciting to me. I think the opportunity that it has to deliver healthcare to the end user is important, but I also think it needs to be respected, and I think that's one of the things that often is forgotten. And again, we've talked about this in the past, that often something is created, but the after effects of what that means to the health system and how that impacts people in the longer term, that's always not considered. The rush is to get it up and running, not how does this work in the wider sphere and what impact will this have. So, we've talked about EPS in the past. We've talked about, other kind of tech systems and how they can function. And these things aren't always fully thought through. And that's where I think actually I do offer a different perspective, because I'm not always just about what's happening now. It's also how does this impact what we do in moving forward. What have we considered all the options? Is this good? Is this destabilizing? Is this and often they're both. The reality is that change is always both, really. But looking at it from the different sides of the box really is important.
And what do you see as some of the things holding back progress in health technology? Is there anything holding us back?
So I think there's two parts to that answer. So the first one is actually the profession itself. I think there is definitely a contingent of people that will feel that using technology to enhance how we work is scary, or is so new that that thinking about it is just scary again. But also that concept of failure that's happened in the past. We've had so many tech changes come to the healthcare system that have not worked. And are we always just jumping ahead, or are we not learning from the lessons of the past? So I think that's definitely a part of it. The second part is probably the more frustrating one for me personally, and that's interoperability. The simple fact that nothing ever works in tech in the health system because nobody ever creates it to be open and to work with other things. It's very much silo working, very much designed to be this package that could be marketed or sold or however it is, but it sits in its own silo, and that's just.
So what's the answer to that? Because I had a friend who was a computer scientist at university, Dave Oakes. Hello, probably not listening to this. Who worked on the there was some sort of one record program or something a few years ago, and I think the government spent billions on it, and it amounted to naught. It amounted to nothing, and I think that was an attempt for the government to create a records system that would work across the whole of the NHS, perhaps delivering some of the interoperability that you mentioned. And that didn't work, so we had private companies who've kind of created their own sort of solid walled gardens that they sell to general practice and other NHS organisations. What's the answer is what I'm saying. So you want open interoperability. How would you get us there?
So it's a weird answer because it's a paradox answer. The way to do it is to make the legislation through government in order to function. So, because the NHS is our largest employer, and it runs based off legislation like the Health and Social Care Act and various different things that inhibit competition, but also create competition and all these kind of things. And there's so many rules and regulations and red tape when it comes to the NHS that it's that is the reason why it is so difficult to do things. I said there's a paradox answer. The reason is because actually the only way I feel that the NHS can survive is that you actually need to release it from the governmental control. In terms of the way that the government uses it as its political football every couple of years when it comes close to election time or just after election time or whatever it is. It's that annual cycle of change almost that we have that then creates so much disruption. And how many times have we had, there will not be a reorganisation, but actually we're reorganising it,
It's so frustrating. I almost lament the loss of Jeremy Hunt because I'm just expecting everything to change all over it.
Exactly.
And I just like things not to change for a while. I
think until those two parts are addressed, which like I said, it's a paradox because I'm saying in one way we need legislation driven by government in order to free things up to make it more sensible. At the same time, government needs to get its mitts off the NHS.
So are you meaning sort of like the Bank of England used to not be independent and the government used to reduce the interest rates to give everyone cash in their pocket from their mortgage before elections, and then they made them independent and they made the Office of National Statistics as independent and the Office of Budget Responsibility. Are you talking about a sort of Office of NHS? Effectively.
I mean, some people will say that's what NHS England is. But the reality is NHS England does the diktats of the government. So, it runs with what the government says to do and how to do it and that kind of stuff. So the government came up with this lovely idea of 8-to-8 access, which is everyone widely recognises is a nice idea, but logistically is not happening and not feasible and not really the priority of healthcare at this moment in time because we do not have the resources to do it. That's a whole other discussion, which I know we're not going to focus on. But the reality is that's how I feel we can fix things. It's a combination approach.
So, Gandhi, I've heard a lot about things which have been quite successful, gone very well. Has there been anything that you've been involved in which hasn't quite worked out or where there's lessons to be learned?
Oh, definitely. So I think I mentioned earlier that a couple of times my website has gone down, and that's down to me not knowing how to run it properly. That's me learning on the job effectively, and there's been numerous times where the user interface side of it has definitely not worked properly, and it's taken me either hours or potentially even days to fix that kind of stuff, and that's because I'm trying to do it all myself and don't outsource it. Probably the biggest one though is so some of the people may know this. I actually created a teledermatology app called Photo Consent, and this again was derived out of need that I saw in our profession. So I talk about being on a lot of social media platforms and groups and that kind of stuff, and one of the things I saw in particular in some of these GP groups was GPs sharing images of patients, and I was always questioning, is the consent appropriate for that, and how can we make that sensible, more protective for GPs, as well as having a better process and governance involved in it. And there wasn't really anything at the time that was doing this really, so I went off and created and funded an app that did this. And the really smart thing about it was that the consent was actually ingrained in the metadata of the image. So if the image ever got into the wrong place, you'd have complete consent written into the stuff that could be extracted out to say, actually, yeah, I did this properly. Unfortunately, it didn't work out the way it should have done, and there's two reasons for that. So one that was, they're both out of my control. But one hit me first, which was actually Facebook ended up buying the back end that my app was created on. So obviously all this data had to be stored somewhere, and Facebook ended up buying the company that stored it, and then Facebook being Facebook, they closed it down.
So what company was...
Where was the back end? It was a company called Pass, and effectively it meant that my back end had gone. Now I could have paid to change that, I could have restructured the app or whatever, but the reality is when this happened, I just did not have the time. I did not have the funds to do that. And if I was a true entrepreneur, I think at that point I could have said, you know what, I'm going to go all in and let's go for it. Reality is I just had my son and my priorities were different at that point. And didn't work out. Retrospectively, GDPR would have killed it as well, because actually having the metadata ingrained in the image is completely against GDPR principles and that kind of stuff. So now in our post-GDPR world, it wouldn't have worked either.
What was the other thing? You mentioned two things.
Yeah, so that was
the second thing.
Yeah, GDPR was the second one.
Yeah, I saw the app at the time, and it was ahead of its time actually, because this was before our CCG at least, was purchasing a teledermatology solution. And I've often thought, if you'd have gone more all in on that, you could have, had something quite successful on your hands, because it really was ahead of its time.
So I'm appreciative. So I outsource this. I'm not a coder. Let me be clear on that. A lot of the stuff I've learned by myself, but I'm by no means a computer coder or a website coder or anything like that. So I outsource this. It's to a really good company, which I recommend, Podmedics. And
hello, Podmedics.
Yeah, no, they did some really awesome work for me, and they've done a lot of awesome work actually out there. It was a great piece of kit. It worked really well. It was very slick interface. It did what it had to do, kind of thing. But reality was, my life got hectic, and priorities were different at that point for me. And clearly, my son was more of a priority to me than this. And retrospectively, I've lost several £1,000s on a venture. But you know what? It was a great experience. I learned a lot of lessons from it. I've learned how not to do things, definitely, and I've learned to pick and choose my opportunities a bit better.
Biggest mistake with that one, Gandhi?
Biggest mistake was probably not going all in. Actually, if I had invested more time and stuff, then it would have been. I think, like you said, the opportunity that had, and particularly now in the world that we live in, it could have been up there with some of these big tech companies and that kind of stuff.
Definitely.
I think the other possible one is actually, it's a lesson I've learned over time. It's recognizing how to value your time. So I've tried to maintain a lot of things while still doing 6-7 clinical sessions a week in terms of what I'm doing, and rapidly realizing that actually something's got to give. If you're going to dedicate time to all of these ventures, you have to have separate set aside time, because the clinical stuff just bleeds everywhere otherwise. And particularly being a partner, I'm sure many of you will appreciate that in the current world that we live in.
Yeah. Right, that leads in very nicely into another question that I've been wanting to ask.
Okay.
So you wear lots of hats, and as someone involved in tech, I see that you have worn lots of hats in the past. So you've potentially been an entrepreneur with a product. You've got a website that communicates, and a podcast, here we are, that communicates about health technology and has an educational type role. You're also a provider of healthcare in itself. I think you may be working, you mentioned on the last podcast, you may be working with Babylon Health potentially soon and are onboarding with them. Lots of different roles. Where do you see your role in advancing the future of health tech?
My personal role, I see is that how to make things easier. I think one of the things I've always tried to do is explain how one system works with another, and I think that's what I can generally do quite well. So I teach and I lecture on how to use technology to enhance the way that you work, and how to use it to enhance your CPD collection. That's a lot of what the focus of eGPlearning is about. It's about trying to help the jobbing GP to make just a small change that may make either their clinical work works better, or their appraisal, revalidation work, or simply just their life works better. And there's a variety of different ways I've done that. My most recent one that some of you hopefully have seen is something I call Tip Thursday. I've really enjoyed doing it, actually. And it's simply just quick little video snippet of the things that I use, to try and make my life a little bit easier. So I'm on my 7th one this week. These can be clinical resources.
What is it this week?
So this week I love it personally. It's a website called Keybr, Keybr, and it's simply a website that teaches you to type faster. And for me, that is awesome. I think I'm pretty quick. I'm in the 60th centile, I think, in terms of typing, and that's about 40-45 words a minute kind of thing. By no means in the league of our typist. One of our typists at work can hit 90 words a minute, and that is just scarily fast. But you know what? It's a fun little website to have a go with, and basically it improves your muscle memory when you're typing, and that's the way it works. I loved it so much I've actually created a little competition around this one. So if people are still listening and it's not closed, because it is going to close next week, simply go on the website, have a few goes, get your best timing, get your best score. Person who gets a high score, I'm going to send out a free prize to.
Fantastic. Right, I'm going to have a go.
I challenge you, Andy.
Let's see. So I've got to beat your typing speed.
Yeah, definitely. That's the bar at the moment. Yeah. 41 words a minute and 7 to 8, I think, was my score on Keybar. So
cool. Gandhi, in this next section, I'm going to ask you some questions a little bit more about life and your own kind of personal productivity and things. But so, Gandhi, who do you admire? Okay. Who's a hero of yours? Can be in health technology, can be in anything.
Okay, so I think for me, it's going to sound a little bit corny, but my hero is my dad. He's raised me. He sacrificed so much to get me to where I am. My education, my values, a lot of that has come from my father. And a lot of people comment about my work ethic, how the fact that I'm dedicated to a lot of what I do. That's seeing my dad do what he's done his entire life, which is provide for his family. And hands down, what he has done is something I can never forget and never repay him enough for. So, being able to model him, emulate him in any way is always something that's important to me. I think in terms of primary care, I've had a lot of good mentors, and in terms of the way that I work, particularly in the past was my trainers when I was learning and stuff, and particularly there's a couple of people at the practice, being in medical practice when I was working. I valued their input quite a lot. My current practice, my partners are unbelievably supportive to me, and it's one of the reasons why I still remain a partner. A lot of people always say to me, well, why? It's mental at the moment. The amount of stuff we're having to do is just crazy. And particularly in my practice, we've had some unique challenges in terms of practice funding and buildings, and if any of you who follow my blog will and eGPlearning will know how many of the challenges I've had with that. But my partners are amazing, and the fact that they've supported me through the ups and downs, particularly in the past few years, has been something that has really kept me going and keeps me where I am. So,
fantastic! That's really admirable. I was thinking how I would answer that. I think I was going to say Captain Picard.
Oh, well, if you're going...
Sorry, Dad, but...
Well, no, if you're going sci-fi, then clearly, my nickname is Dr Gandalf. I advocate myself as the Time Lord Istari. So for those that don't understand that, Doctor Who, Time Lord, Istari, Gandalf, that's the type of wizard he is, and that's my moniker online. That's who I am social media-wise and stuff. And you know what? For me, it epitomises everything about me. Crazy, geeky, and absolutely unpredictable at times.
Cool. Gandhi, you mentioned that you're still a partner. You do quite a number of sessions a week at that, as well as all the other things. I often kind of look at your life and the amount of output that I see from you in terms of all of these different jobs and social media. And I think, Gandhi, how do you manage being so busy? What's your secret? Are you using some secret apps to keep you, so efficient? Yeah. How do you do it?
So partly I don't sleep. So I have useful. Yeah, it's definitely helpful. So I've got a near 5-year-old and I've got a 1-year-old, and you know what? They wake me up at every hour of the day, and the reality is then I'm up doing other kind of things at weird times of the day, and sometimes actually that's helpful. It means I get to do things. I try and organise what I can when I can. So I've always got about 5 things on at the go. Someone may say I've got ADHD, but you know what? Reality is I just multitask pretty well, generally speaking. And I love social media. There's no ifs and buts about it. I live on social media. Many people say I've got the internet plugged into my brain. And you mentioned apps. So as I said, Facebook is pretty much the highest use app on my phone. I use quite a few to try and organise and structure my day. And they can help me.
What do you use to structure your day? So you mean sort of calendar and productivity to-do apps?
So everything has to be in my calendar, because if it's not, then I will forget and not do it. So that's one thing. And, putting reminders in to do this. I have sections to say, this is my dedicated time for me to do my trainee evaluations. This is my dedicated time to make sure I get my appraisal done. So my appraisal is due in about a month. I'm not worried about it. Most of it's done, but as like many people, I've got to tie in a couple of things and stuff. So, I've got my 1 week warning and my 1 week warning before the 1 week warning to make sure it gets done and sorted. I do have a couple of productivity apps that I use. I'm going to be slightly secretive on that one though, because it's coming up on my Tip Thursdays shortly.
Okay.
If you want to know those, hopefully by the time you guys are hearing this, you'll see it coming out.
I would love to see your productivity, your personal productivity workflow at some stage. How ideas come in, where they get stored, how they get sorted, how they end up on your calendar. So that's my request for a Tip Thursday or a Tip Super Thursday.
Wow, that's a complete workflow, Andy. That's a big ask. Yeah.
It's good, but if I'm in it for GDPR, maybe I need to know about the workflow. Anyway, we do digress. We did a very confusing episode about GDPR. We might link it in the show notes.
Oh, definitely. You guys need to listen to that one.
It just demonstrates how confusing and confused everyone in general practice time was at the time.
Yeah.
Cool. Gandhi, so we've heard a lot about how your journey through health tech, how you got interested, how you got started, and what you've been up to. There are a lot of people out there, perhaps just kind of starting on that journey. Might be a general practitioner, might be another doctor, might be a nurse, might be another healthcare professional. How would you recommend people start to begin to be involved in health technology?
I think first of all you have to have the interest and be open to the concept that technology can actually support what you're doing. Don't get me wrong, sometimes it falls flat on its face, and we've seen several examples of that. So you talked about the interoperability program the NHS had and clearly didn't work. But actually there's lots of ways that technology can improve healthcare delivery. You go back 20 years ago, seeing a computer in general practice was impossible, and actually now imagine working as a GP without a computer in front of you. It would scare you silly. The days that we had, the cyber hack, for example, the days after that were some of the worst days in practice because you could just not, there's nothing you could do. It was limited, it was barn door basic emergency care and that was it. So our systems run on technology, and there's a variety of different things that can help you. Resources you can use for patients, resources you can use for yourself. So I think if you're interested in it, first of all, have a look. I'm clearly going to say have a look at eGPlearning if you want to. There's lots of interim guides and tips and all that kind of stuff of where to look, what to use, particularly if you're a clinician. So I focus a lot on terms of clinician needs and resources that you can use either to help yourself or to help your patients. And definitely there's lots of stuff out there. The blogs I've done, a few of them are about how to get working as a GP. Obviously, a lot of the stuff will focus on GPs, but is applicable to any kind of healthcare worker. I do a lot of work with pharmacists at the moment, so supporting them in terms of how they work, and I've even taken on some roles in terms of supporting colleagues as well. So definitely have a look there. There's lots of really good resources. Actually, again, I'm going to mention them. Our sponsor, Health Tech Network.
I was thinking the same thing.
They're a new provider, actually. They're quite new to the health tech sphere, but in terms of UK-based health tech, there's not many information sources around. People like Pulse Today and GP Online will cover the odd story, but their focus is on the news and current events and that kind of stuff. Health Tech Network, clearly health tech focus. Some really cool podcasts out there. So the other one I'd recommend is the General Practice podcast by Ben Gowland over at Ockham Healthcare. We've actually been on his show, Andy.
That was a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, and listening to his stuff, he's got some really interesting perspective of how innovative primary care can work and stuff, and health tech does feature into that. So there's some really, really good resources out there. If anybody's interested, feel free to contact me, either at eGPlearning or my own personal one at Dr Gandalf on Twitter, or obviously search me out on Facebook and say hi. Yeah,
fantastic. So Gandhi, final question.
Go for it.
So in this brown envelope that I've got here is £100 million. Okay. Here it is. What I'd like you to do with it is invest it or do something in the field of health technology. Gandhi, what are you going to do with this £100 million?
Okay. So interesting. If you'd asked me this a year ago, I would have had a completely different answer.
Give us both.
Okay. So a year ago, I had this grand plan that we could do what the banking sector did, effectively, for healthcare. Not in that way. So what the banks have done, there used to be a teller service that you go to the counter, speak to somebody behind the desk, and then they would deal with whatever you want. Now, if you go to a bank, trying to find that bank teller is pretty hard. You have to get through an army of cash machine kind of screens and stuff and that kind of stuff, and somebody to guide you to use those, and if not, then okay, fair enough, you may be able to access them.
I stood in the queue to go to the desk, and I kept getting bugged. This, why are you in the queue? You should go and use the machine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the reason why they've done that is because actually a lot of resources and accessibility options are suitable to be used by a cash machine, effectively. You can use that interface through a computer. Definitely there are people that will always want the face-to-face contact, and that's how they work, that's how they structure things. But for majority of things, it can be done that way. why couldn't we do the same in primary care? In actual fact, a lot of the simple functions, sorting out a repeat request, sorting out, simple self-care, sorting out access to check, where has my referral gone? A lot of those kind of concepts could easily be done from a screen. Now, you'd automatically say, well, why don't I do that from the comfort of my own home? Yeah, I agree. It's definitely the more sensible and easier option. But where I work, for example, in the middle of inner city Nottingham, a lot of people don't have easy access to internet. Smartphones, whilst they're great, a lot of my patients don't have the capabilities in terms of being able to use that fully. So, having this option of an in-practice method that is safety and back-ended in terms of offering primary care as well may help to tackle some of the access kind of stuff. However, technology moves so rapidly.
So that was a year.
That was a year ago.
So ATM doctors.
ATM doctors.
Yep.
But obviously, technology's moved way on from there, and in the space of a year, we've seen massive changes. We've seen companies like Babylon and Push Doctor and Q Doctor and all these kind of companies come across and basically create systems that offer that interface through a screen a lot easier. And actually, the tech companies have heard this, they've seen this, and they're taking it on board, and they're integrating that into their system. So, many of you probably remember a few weeks ago, Samsung basically said that they're going to stick Babylon onto every single one of their smartphones moving forward. Whether you agree with that principle or not is irrelevant, because the access element of it is mind-shifting in terms of and disruptive to the way that we offer primary care. And I think that with that in mind, I would actually create a telemedicine system that is open for all practices. Because I think that delivery mechanism is the key thing. And I know that NHS England are looking at some of this in the future, and funding streams hopefully will be available to support practices and healthcare delivery. But we're not just talking primary care. I think this can be done in all aspects of healthcare, district nursing care, secondary care in particular, looking at how clinics are delivered. Why do patients have to go to hospital for an outpatient appointment? Often, you don't have many interventions done, particularly at follow-up appointments. It's normally to see how you're getting on, not necessarily to examine you or to, I've been to appointments with family and stuff, and, they're in for 5 minutes, but it takes 2.5 hours to go because you have to wait, you have to park, you have to do all this kind of stuff, get back for what effectively was a 10-minute consultation.
So is anyone doing this right now?
I think there's some companies looking at it, and definitely there's some funding pilots and all these kind of systems. So there's DPS on NHS England to look at companies that are doing it. But the reason why I think I'd use that money to do it better, because most of my life is about trying to do things better than what has already been done, is a lot of these don't work in terms of how multiple practices can offer it. And one of the things I'm keen to look at would be a system whereby multiple practices, multiple areas can use an integrated system. So again, back to my earlier issue of interoperability and stuff, that works across boundaries, that works across areas, and therefore, it's more married up and more unified. And I think creating that kind of ecosystem, creating that kind of integrated element is the future of healthcare delivery.
So £100 million, start a company and deliver that.
Definitely.
Okay, good. Ambitious. So
if Bill Gates is listening, here you go, mate.
Yeah. If anyone really has £100 million, well, there's your pitch and your business plan. Gandhi, it's been fantastic talking to you.
Thank
and
you.
Having the opportunity to ask some more in-depth questions and explore your ideas. I hope that the listeners have found it interesting as well. If they've got, I think you mentioned earlier, but how would the listeners get in touch with you if they wanted to interact with you, Gandhi?
So to contact myself, I'm on Twitter at Dr Gandalf 52. I'm not 52 years old. I always have to make that point out. And alternatively, you can contact me at eGPlearning on Twitter as well. Or the best way is probably through the Facebook page, eGPlearning. So if you just search that out, you'll find me without any great difficulties. And the website is always there, eGPlearning.co.uk.
Fantastic. And I'm at Dr. A.W. Foster on Twitter as well. Just dropping that in there in case I was interested.
Definitely.
I'm not being interviewed, but there we go. Okay, so that's been fantastic. It's time to sign off. Catch us next time for the next exciting instalment of eGPlearning Podblast. Thanks for listening, and we will see you soon.
See you later, guys. Bye.